You ever notice how certain leaders just seem to appear right when history seems to be calling for them? Well, today, we're not just going to talk about one leader. We're going to look at a whole phenomenon, a specific style of leadership that shows up when the times really, really seem to demand it. It's a pattern, and once you see it, you start to see our current political world in a completely different way. And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of it. The rise of a so-called strongman leader is almost never an accident. It's a response. It happens when a society feels like the old way of doing things is just fundamentally broken, and that something or someone radically different is needed to fix it. It feels, well, necessary. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at why this demand for authority even happens in the first place. Then, we'll get into a framework called the Strongman curve to see how this style plays out. We'll explore how its biggest strengths can turn into liabilities, look at the nitty-gritty of political realities, talk about legacy, and then wrap up with a big question for tomorrow. Okay, so first things first. Where does this demand actually come from? Well, it's usually born out of this deep, widespread frustration, a feeling that the whole system is just stuck in mud and that normal politics isn't cutting it anymore. Just think back to the mood in India before 2014. I mean, you can practically feel the frustration here. There was this overwhelming perception of policy paralysis. And in politics, perception is reality. People saw endless delays, a government that seemed way more interested in its own survival than in actually leading. All of this just created a massive appetite for a total reset. And that appetite completely changed what people wanted from a leader. Suddenly, society was done with managers, tired of nuance, and fed up with compromise. They started asking for commanders, for blunt answers, and more than anything else, for decisive authority. Narendra Modi's rise was, in many ways, a perfect match for that psychological moment. He promised speed where there was stagnation, and certainty where there was just drift.
Which brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer, the strongman curve. And look, this isn't just about India or any single country. It's a structural pattern you can see across different democracies. It helps us map the entire journey of this leadership style, from its powerful, effective beginning to its natural, built-in limits.
So, the curve basically has three phases. First up is correction. This is kind of the honeymoon period. Centralizing power feels like a miracle cure. Decisions get made fast, and the leader seems absolutely indispensable. But then you move into consolidation. You start to feel some friction. The system begins to push back. What felt decisive now might start to feel a little dominant. And finally, you hit saturation. This is the point of diminishing returns. The same centralization that made things fast now actually makes them slow and inflexible. And frankly, society just gets tired from the constant high-stakes drama. And that is such a key point. The end of the curve isn't some dramatic collapse. It's more like a plateau. It's fatigue. It's a point where the model just can't deliver those same big psychological rewards anymore. Its magic starts to fade. And this leads us to a really fascinating paradox at the very heart of this leadership style. The exact same qualities that make it so powerful in a crisis, the very things that bring it to power, well, those same things have the seeds of its limitations baked right into them once things start to calm down. You can see the trade-offs so clearly here. In a crisis, speed is a huge asset. But when things are stable, that same speed can steamroll right over necessary debate. The authority that was great for cutting through gridlock, it becomes a liability when you actually need to build consensus. And the certainty that felt so reassuring in a time of chaos can just crush the nuance you need to govern a complex, functioning country. Because here's the bottom line. You just can't run a huge, diverse democracy like it's in a permanent state of emergency. It's not sustainable. Eventually, institutions need room to breathe, markets need things to be predictable, and people just need a sense of normal. The crisis model, by its very nature, has an expiration date.
Now, it isn't just about the public mood changing. There are other, way more practical forces that start to put limits on this leadership style. And that brings us to the cold, hard calculus of politics.
Look, this isn't a criticism, it's just a biological reality. Running a country as massive and complex as India is an unbelievably demanding job. And as any leader gets older, political parties and entire democracies just naturally become more aware of risk. It's just another variable that gets plugged into the political equation. Because at the end of the day, political parties are survival machines. They ask really unsentimental questions. Is this model still winning us elections? Is it starting to tick off potential allies we might need later? Is all this centralized power making the party's own future too uncertain? This is the kind of pragmatic math that happens behind closed doors. Which brings us to one of the biggest challenges for any dominant leader, figuring out when your work is done. History is just littered with stories of leaders whose biggest test was knowing when to walk away. The timing of an exit is every bit as important to a legacy as what you achieved in power. I think this quote is just so insightful. Because when a leader's style becomes predictable, what once felt bold can start to feel, well, just repetitive. What used to be energizing becomes tiring. Repetition turns a unique strength into a vulnerability that everyone understands, and that opponents can finally start to figure out how to beat.
And the stakes for getting that timing wrong, they are incredibly high. One last term that feels out of step with the moment can tarnish a legacy that took a decade to build. Sometimes protecting that legacy requires the discipline of restraint, not the raw will to just keep on fighting. So, as we start to wrap this up, let's be crystal clear about something. This analysis is not an argument against strong leadership. It's an acknowledgement that it was seen as necessary, and for many, it delivered. The real point here is to shift from that debate and start asking a structural question about what comes next. And really, this is the most important takeaway. This style of leadership is a solution designed for a specific phase. It's a powerful tool for fixing a system that feels broken, but it is not, and it was never meant to be, a permanent model of governance for all time. And so this is the question we're left with. It's not about whether this style was right or wrong for the past. It's about whether the needs of a country today are the same as they were 10 years ago. And that's a question that can't be answered by simple loyalty or opposition. It's a question that requires a really clear-eyed look at the challenges and the opportunities of tomorrow.